An introduction for a speech should be about 10 to 20% of the entire length. That means if your speech is 5 minutes long, your introduction would be about 45 seconds. For a 10-minute speech, that's about a minute and a half for the whole introduction. That really isn't long. So why is it important to work hard on your introduction? Well, that's because the first thing that you say will either make your audience interested in your speech, or it'll turn them off and they won't pay attention to anything that you have to say. So, what's the purpose of an introduction? Well, there are several things that an introduction accomplishes. It can gain the attention of your audience. Now, I don't just mean that you're getting them to sit there and be quiet and polite, but you want to actually get them to be interested enough to pay attention. The introduction also states the purpose of your speech. It tells your audience what it is that they're going to understand by paying attention to what you have to say. Another thing is to establish credibility. This means it gives your audience a chance to feel that you are competent enough to talk about the topic that you're speaking about, and that they can believe you or trust you to be honest with them. Does the audience feel like you care about the topic or about them? If not, you'll lose them. In the introduction, you'll also establish a connection with your audience. You should tell them why the information is useful to them. And finally, the introduction should sort of preview the main ideas that you're going to talk about. It's sort of like a roadmap of exactly what you're going to say. Now, when putting together your introduction, the first thing you want to do is introduce yourself and welcome the audience. The introduction to yourself is the first step in establishing credibility. Here is where you can say if you're a student or an expert in the subject. You don't really need to say a lot. It's just a sentence or two, but it's important. And then you want to include a hook. This means you want to grab the attention of the audience. And there's several different common types of hooks. The first is that you could simply just state the subject of your speech. I think there's more interesting ways, but it does get the point across. Another way to hook your audience would be to share a quotation. Quotations are interesting, and usually people like to hear them. So a quotation makes a good hook. Another is that you could make a historical reference to gain your audience's attention. It's sort of a way of evoking your audience's memory of the past. And this works well if history is repeating itself, so to speak. And almost the opposite, you can talk about a current event. Another thing you can do is tell an anecdote. An anecdote is a personal account or story of something that relates to your topic. Now, you have to keep it brief. Remember, the entire introduction is about 10 to 20% of the entire speech. So you don't have a long time to tell a big story. And sometimes a hook that could be effective would be a startling statistic. Statistics are very interesting, but remember, the information has to be true and related to the topic. Now, you've heard the term clickbait on social media and online articles, right? And that's when the title makes you want to click on it. But then when you click on the article or the video or whatever it is, the information isn't relative. So make sure you're not giving hooks that are just clickbait. And one of the most popular ways to hook your audience in a speech is to ask a question. It can be one that you want the audience to respond to by raising their hand or speaking out loud, or it can be rhetorical, meaning they just think about the answer. It makes people engage with what you're saying, even if they're not responding out loud. Now remember, you can make any of these hook types serious or funny, but if you go with funny, be careful not to offend your audience. Now that you have a hook, you want to connect it to your topic. This means that you want to explain how that hook relates to your topic. And you may be able to do this in just one sentence, And that's if the hook is very clear, if there's a clear connection. But you may need 2 or 3 sentences if you've picked a less clear hook. Now, once you have the hook and some sentences that connect the topic, the next thing you want to do is come up with a sentence or two that sort of explains why your audience should care about the topic. If you explain why you care and you can show your audience your passion for the topic, that'll help the audience to care as much as you do. This is another step in adding credibility. Always be honest about your information and where it comes from. If you are learning about the subject, that's perfectly okay. To be credible just means that you're trustworthy. And the last part of your introduction is your statement of purpose or your thesis statement. What's your topic? And then you want to add in the controlling idea. That's like a roadmap of what you're going to talk about during your speech. So make it very clear. State your main points and in what order you're going to talk about those points. This will help your audience to sort of plan what they're going to listen for or to understand what they're hearing. It serves as a bridge that connects the introduction to the body of your speech. One thing I want to note about preparing the introduction. Now, as you're researching your topic, you can sort of keep your eye out for interesting things for your hook. Maybe you find a statistic or a quote. When I make a speech, I plan my thesis statement first, and the statement of purpose really, or I try to, and then I move on and work on the body of the speech. I don't finalize my introduction until I've completed the body of my speech. So basically, it's thesis statement and controlling idea, and then the body paragraphs. And then I go back and work on the wording of my introduction after I've finished making the rest of the speech. And I always do write the conclusion last. But the point is, just because the introduction is first doesn't mean all of your attention should go to your introduction first. The thesis statement, because that's clear. You know what you're researching. But beyond that, I think going back and editing your speech introduction is something that you should do after you've worked on the rest of your speech. All right, I hope you found this video helpful.